Hello, everyone. I am Alan Wallner, President and Visionary of Conscious Branding. And first, I wanted to start today by wishing everyone a Happy New Year and for a year full of abundance, love, and personal growth. And welcome to Thrivecast. With Thrivecast, our intention is to focus on you, your business, and your success. And with each episode, we discuss at a high level topics that spark new thoughts. This is a new world, a new way of doing business. And so we need to kind of start thinking about things differently. And we want to generate ideas and push the boundaries of what we know is familiar. And hopefully we may even frame up a new mindset to ignite your business forward and to inspire action. And as we focus in on our topic for today, copy seems to be this mystical barrier, to successful communications with our prospects, clients, employees, and community. Even more so today. And we're going to be exploring the world of words, language, and communication, and the magical content that attracts customers. We're going to look at what copy does and how can, what it does and what it can do for your business and how you can master it, or at least make it something that isn't so crazy for you. We'll take a little bit of time to even tap into strategy, content versus copy, and even what equates to good copy and content and how to sustain it over time, because that's kind of the secret. But before we get started, I'd like to welcome our panelists and introduce you to them. I have Wendy Jacobson. She's copywriter for incredible content. And Wendy works with her clients to create content that builds and maintains their credibility and acquires more clients and generates more revenue. And Wendy produces content for businesses consistently when they don't have the time, resources, or interest to create it themselves. That's a good resource to have on hand. So welcome and good to have you here, Wendy.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And then next we have Susan Rose. She's a copywriter for Rosebud Communications. And Susan works with empath entrepreneurs to increase their impact and income. And she works with her clients to increase engagement and loyalty with the content that creates visibility and recognition as an expert and strategically positions them as a leader. And Susan, it's great to have you here today. I appreciate it.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Then thirdly, we have Rosemary Wallner. She's the editor and proofreader for Conscious Branding. So Rosie works along with me here, and she has a diverse background in a variety of industries, from financial to medical and from retail to motorsports. Her focus is making your clients' marketing and business communications impactful, professional, and error-free. And we rely on her to do that for us as well. So thanks, Rosie, for taking time out to be here today with us.
You are welcome. I'm happy to be here.
All right. So I don't know about all of you, but I'm excited to hear kind of what our panelists have to say today, because this is kind of a real volatile business climate, and we can all kind of use whatever help we can get these days in terms of communicating with our clients and attracting the right ones to us in the right way so that they want to work with us. So I'm going to start out with our first question here. And I would like to ask our panelists to share kind of when you first realized that copy was your thing. Was it something you did when you were younger, or did it just kind of come out of the woodwork as you began your career? And I was hoping you could kind of share your story here. So with that, I was going to start with Wendy to see if you could kind of tell us a little bit about how you got started.
Sure. So I have always loved to write. When I was a kid, loved to write. Two of my friends in the neighborhood and I put together a neighborhood journal that we gave out to free called Paperclip. We went to the drugstore and photocopied the pages, and we thought this was going to be a great thing. But after one issue, we realized it was a lot of work and we weren't getting paid for it. So we tabled it. And never actually thought that I would pursue writing as a career. Now, my father always encouraged me to do so, but I thought I was going to go to law school. Junior year in college, realized I did not want to go to law school. So after I graduated, I just fell into a marketing position and worked in marketing and sales for both Fortune 100 as well as startup companies. But really what I wanted to do, and I've always really wanted to do, was own my own business. Both of my parents were business owners and I wanted to follow in their footsteps. So I left the corporate world and got into residential real estate because that was a path of least resistance. The barrier to entry was very low. And I loved real estate, but what I really found out that I enjoyed the most was building my brand. and communicating with my clients through words. I mean, obviously the service that I provided was important, but real estate's really competitive. So I wanted my brand to stand out. And I had a lot of fun doing that. But after the birth of my second child, almost 14 years ago, I realized that real estate and being a parent for me did not go hand in hand. So after she was born, I took about a year off and then literally fell into a role helping a local entrepreneur, food startup company, build his brand. And from there, I just kind of built my business. He eventually sold his business to Schwann's. I stayed on with the Schwann company doing some writing for them and built my business through there. And I got the best of both worlds because I was building my own business, doing something that I loved, writing. And over the past almost, I guess, 13 years, I've worked for a variety of different businesses in a variety of different industries, doing a variety of different writing. And it's been a blast. I really enjoy it. And just a final note, every so often when I talk to my dad, he asks me what I'm writing. So it's nice that he's getting joy out of finally seeing me, having pursued of a job in writing. So that's the story.
It's good when your parents are interested in what you're doing.
Sure.
So when you were working for a larger corporation, Schwann's, did you find that it sort of put your understanding and learning of branding and content and copy on steroids? Really got you moving fast with kind of understanding how that all works?
Well, it did because, obviously they're a big company, and other big companies I work for too, they work in silos. So that you have to be pretty specific on what you're doing and who you're doing it for, who you're writing to. And also, staying true to their style guide and brand guidelines. It kind of brought a whole new world of copy and content into my life, which just, has stayed with me, and I've springboarded from since that time. So it was a good experience for sure.
Sure. Well, Susan, I'd like to hear your story.
All right. Well, parts of my story kind of echo Wendy's, and I'm beginning to wonder if that's just how it is with all writers, that from birth our families are encouraging us to go down this road. But I come from a family of people who just love words. So language was always very important. Communicating, writing was always very important. But I think when I go back, it's like, when did I really feel the call to go into this general profession? And I'm going to date myself here and tell you that it was during the Watergate hearings. I thought Woodward and Bernstein were heroes. I thought they were the coolest people on earth. I was completely mesmerized with what they had been able to do through journalism. So from that point on, I decided I was going to be a journalist. So I went to college and majored in journalism. It turns out, though, that being a newspaper reporter is not actually really my bag. I think, too nice, to put it mildly. I didn't really have I didn't have what it took to do it on the level that I dreamed of doing it. So I went into magazine article writing, magazine editing, and that's really where I started my career. So I am at heart, and we're going to talk about content versus copy a little bit later, but I started in the content world and in magazines and writing articles and in-depth pieces like that, and just always have loved it. And like many people in my career, kind of went around. I ended up being a management consultant for a while, leading community development projects, which was all the communication around that. And then about 20 years ago, my sister said, hey, you want to quit your really stable, cushy job and start a branding agency with me? And since I was single and, had a mortgage, I said, sure, let's do it. So that's when I made the shift more into copywriting, is when we started our branding agency and did that for about 10 years. I'm working with all sorts of different kinds of companies, small micro businesses, solopreneurs, large, huge, Microsoft was one of our clients. So we really ran the gamut, which I always thought was great because, you do see how different people do it. You see how different industries communicate. You see how people with different budgets and different levels of what they're doing, what they can do. And we can all do it. We just need to know how to do it. So after our agency dissolved, then I just went out on my own to do the freelance writing, and here I am today.
Sure. It sounds like you kind of really followed your passion. And over time while doing that, did you kind of sort of discover a greater purpose around your copy and things, to kind of really kind of set you in a kind of a real, guided direction for how you wanted to take your copy?
Yeah, so I've always believed in the power of words to tell a story and to persuade. At the end of the day, love persuasive copy, whether it's overt sales or whether it's content. I think that we all have a story to tell, and being able to articulate that is powerful. So every project I work on, I mean, ideally I'm working with people who I think are trying to bring some amazing change into the world at large or into their community or whatever, and I can help them. So that has never changed. I mean, I think that was the piece of the whole Watergate thing that struck my heart when I was young, and I've always kind of carried that idealistic
Sure.
philosophy with me.
Sure. All right, cool. Thanks. It's good to have all that insight. Rosie, you kind of want to check in and hear your story a little bit. I know it, but others here don't. So.
Right. Well, I went to college actually as a computer science major, but by my sophomore year, I realized that was just not my thing. So I started to take more English and journalism classes, and I was just hooked on words. As I started my career as a writer, I wrote newspaper articles. I wrote several school and library nonfiction books, biographies, but I also discovered that my love for shaping other people's words through proofreading and through editing copy. As an author, as a writer, you take your research, you have ideas, you create your copy, and I just find that very difficult for myself. But what I found that I can help to improve or work with words that have already been written. By knowing like a writer's audience or their purpose, I could ensure that their content had some impact, and I got into more the nitty gritty, real detail, correcting grammar mistakes and typos, but also making sure there was consistency in tone and style. So, and then I went on my own. I became a contractor, and then started working with conscious branding. And I also kept adding to my services, not just the detail work, but more helping them with the content. What I love about my career today is how diverse it is. I have many different clients. I edit advertising copy up to emails and catalogs. So every day is kind of a little bit different.
All right, well, thanks. Yeah, I know you've had the kind of a wide variety of things happening, and originally you worked for a lot of large, big book publishers, and then you kind of got down into the nitty gritty of marketing and all kinds of, different target audience groups and helping writers keep consistent with their messaging for each of them.
Right. And really taking what someone else has written and not taking it over, but working with them to just make it the best it can be.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing all that. All right. So today, you hear the terms content and copy a lot and almost used interchangeably. So how would you define copy versus content, and how does that impact how you work with copy? And with that, I think we're going to go ahead and start with Susan.
All right. Thank you. This is such a good question because there is a lot of confusion around it, and they are technically very different things. Copy is about the sell. You are persuading people, you are presenting your offer, you are encouraging people to take action and buy something from you. Content is more about the relationship building. It's about establishing your expertise and laying down the groundwork for what you know, sharing this information. This webinar is content, basically. And so they both have very valuable places within the whole marketing strategy. But if you just think about copy is to sell, content is to build relationships, in my opinion.
Okay. So when you start kind of differentiating between the two, say it's as you're mapping out your planning for say a website or something, sometimes there's content and copy on a website. So do you kind of break a page up and define various roles on the page or sections of the website?
Yeah, I think that there are definitely sections, and it really depends on the kind of website you have. I don't, having a purely sales focused website is not appropriate for all businesses. So it starts first with who are you? What is your business, and what is the website doing for you? And then I would say within there will be areas that are going to have more of the copy sales, like booking a call or getting the free whatever. That I would consider that copy, not content. And then maybe the data sections, the blog, the any sort of process types of things you do, or more in-depth pages you have, are really going to be content focused, typically.
All right. Yeah, no, that sounds good. Rosie, I'd like to hear kind of your perspective from kind of the editing side, because you often get involved with content as well as the copy.
Right. Well, with editing, there's basically 3 types of editing, and each one makes a distinction between content and copy. So for example, substantive editing, this is paying attention to the content, and it's kind of a first read. And with that, you're really looking at what the copy is saying. You're reading to suggest changes in the structure, even adding or deleting copy, even inserting heads and subheads to help, a reader in longer copy. And then there's the copy editing stage, which is once the content is set, once you have what you want to say down, then it's more some technical, correcting the grammar, spelling, improving maybe some style, even tightening up your message. And then the third type of editing is proofreading, and that's the final check. So by that point, all your content should be in place. And again, it's just a last check, maybe excuse me, you check the copy on the website to make sure there's no line breaks and things like that. So when I work with clients, one of my first questions to them is, what stage are you at? Am I editing for content, or is that clear and I'm just proofing, for a final read through?
So kind of what you're doing a lot of is just looking at everything as a big whole. How are all the different pieces working together? Are they working together? Is there continuity and consistency across all the different channels of content and copy? So it really gets down to looking at the big picture and the details across.
It does. And also, even at the very final stage, making sure that once everything's correctly written, no typos and things, but I usually do one more read, just putting myself in place of the reader, just to double check.
Yeah, that's so important. Just making sure that you understand the target audience and that this content and copy resonates with them. Yeah. All right. Well, Wendy, I'd like to hear kind of how you take a look at content and copy together.
Yeah, and I'll echo what Susan said. I think there is a lot of confusion, and I apologize for any drilling noises you might have in the background. I think a lot of my clients use content and copy interchangeably. They would introduce me to a team player as their copywriter, but I'm writing content for them. Or they're asking me for some content, but it's actually copy that I'm writing. And how I approach the two different disciplines is what Susan said: copy sells and content tells. And so their places are at different points of the sales funnel. Content is really, in my opinion, meant to create awareness and engagement and inform your target audience as to who you are, because they might not know who the heck you are. and you keep feeding that funnel with information, compelling information that speaks to them about their issues. And then when they're ready, when they get to the point, the bottom of the funnel, where you've I don't want to say grease the wheels, but you've built a relationship with them, then some copy can come into place. That's not to say copy can't exist with the content. I'm working right now with a client, a retailer, and all I do is write copy for them. It's, descriptions on their website, their email series, but they also have content that goes along with that, blogs on certain, areas of what they do. So they work hand in hand. I think a lot of businesses interchange the word copy and content and think it's the same, but they truly are two different things.
Yeah, I like how all of you kind of brought in the integration of it, but yet the uniqueness of each. And I think the underlying segment to all this is branding is very important when it comes to all of this, because you need to kind of have the cheat sheet of what is the brand styles, in terms of what's the core message, what's the feeling, what's the emotion, what are all the different aspects of the brand that the content copy needs to convey, especially today in this distance business climate. Your words and your content are even more important. And how are they energetically connecting to the target audience who's supposed to be reading this? Is it copy and content that makes them feel like, oh, you understand me, or is it, selling to me? So really leveraging, I like, Wendy, how you said that, where the content is used to kind of, you say, create awareness and engagement with them with the copy. It's finessing that relationship a little bit more to engage and call them to action. So
Right.
I think it's really nice how it all works together. All right, with that, I'm going to go on to our next question, which is, copy sort of become this mystical barrier to success. Just successful communications for business. And some seem to have it figured out and others do not. And that can leave a lot of business owners scratching their head trying to figure out what this is. Can you share kind of what you do, and kind of something a company can do to kind of make this less of a guessing game and maybe more of a, here's a methodology to follow, or here's some basic concepts to apply to use on some good rules of thumb, I guess, to help people communicate with their target audience effectively. And with that, I'd like to kind of lead with Rosie.
Sure. Well, when someone asks me to edit their copy, there are a few things that I need to know before I get started. And these are also coincidentally things that a writer should be keeping in mind as they write. So I ask my client 3 questions. And one is, who is the copy written for? We've started to talk about that a little bit. Who is the audience? And the more specific, the better, I find. Not just men, but people who own a garage or something like that. My second question that I ask them is, what will the copy be used for? We talked about content versus copy. Is it an email versus a blog, which might be, you can go a little more in depth, and maybe an email you keep a little shorter. Is it website copy versus a formal presentation? And then the third thing I ask him is, why was this copy written? Is it to sell something like we talked about, to inform them, to teach the audience? And once I have this information, and once a writer has that information as well, then the whole process of writing and editing, rewriting if necessary, and then final proofreading goes much more smoothly.
Sure. Yeah, I like how you started bringing up understanding the customer. I know that in the projects we've worked on together, we go quite deep. We build an avatar around that target audience group, that specific segment of the target audience group. What's their name? Kind of what are their challenges in relation to how we can help them, and what are their stress points and disposition. And it's more than just demographics, 30 to 50 and they have a garage. It's what are the psychographics as well, so you can really learn to connect with them. And I know we always pass that along to you. So while you're proofreading, you make sure that the copy and the content is addressing that individual.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And even though sometimes you think of editing or proofreading as something at the end, and a lot of times it's rushed, it is helpful for me, at least, to be part of the whole process rather than just be brought in at the end. And I ask my clients to do that too.
Sure. Wendy, I'd love to hear kind of your side of the story.
Oh my gosh, I could talk about this for hours, but don't worry, I won't. But I will say that, I'm not a fan of writing content or copy for content or copy's sake. So to kind of echo what Rosie said, it's important to understand not only who you're writing for, but why and what you want it to do. And before you even, jump in and decide I'm going to start, writing copy or content or whatever, have a plan, and content, depending on your business and the size of the business and what you want it to accomplish for you. It can be really overwhelming. You can have the best intentions, but then when it comes down to, putting the pedal to the metal, getting it all out can be difficult, right? Because, work and life and whatever gets in the way. So plan out what you are going to do, what you're going to write or what you're going to produce, who it's for, when you're going to produce it, and where it's going to go. Like, where is it going to live? Is it going to be on your website? Are you going to, tweet it out? Are you going to link it to LinkedIn? And don't just do that once. Like, don't produce a piece of content or copy once, share it with the world and then put it in a drawer forever. You can reshare your content over and over and over again. Just get every last drop of juice out of your content that you can. And it all comes down to planning, right? So planning, and you don't have to plan a year out, plan maybe a quarter out. Don't bite off more than you can chew, but commit to what you plan and commit to being consistent with that plan.
Yeah, I like that. The plan is so important. I think the other component to that plan, you'd kind of talked about, mapping it out for a year. Maybe it's having some of that content roughed in, but then being able to modify it as needed as the business climate shifts and changes. But even making that copy be more kind of along the vein of what can your brand do for me rather than about the brand, because
Right.
Really understanding the target audience and planning out that messaging, like you said earlier, so it works with that funnel, brings them along the journey, and
Right.
having that content about them along that way, so you're aligning their mindset with your copy, and really
Sure.
building a relationship. And you can plot that all out on that calendar.
Yeah, and it's okay to pivot. Like, I remember when COVID hit, I'm on a mailing list for a travel agency. At the end of March, they sent a message to their mailing list saying, cruises, cruise sale. Buy your cruise package by April 1st, and save $500. I'm like, you guys are so tone deaf as to the climate right now, right? I mean, the world is shutting down. There are cruise ships that are out at sea because no one will take them. And you're asking me to ship a cruise and save $500. Whenever I see another one of their messages, I just delete it, because they obviously weren't aware of the climate, or they didn't care about the climate. They just cared about that message. And your message really, really matters.
Yeah, it's so important to have that message be organic with what's going on in the business climate.
For sure.
Yeah. Susan, I'd like to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I wish I could say I have like really radically different things to say than these two, but I'm pretty much 100% aligned with them. But I want to reiterate what Wendy said, was creating content or copy just for the sake of doing it because you've got your calendar and you're supposed to be doing it isn't going to serve you, and it's not ultimately going to build your authority and make more sales for you. So I always start, my first question is always, what is the purpose? Why are we coming here today to talk about this thing I'm going to produce for you? And by purpose, I mean, ultimately, what do you want the reader to know or do because they have consumed this? And it is shocking how often people cannot answer that question. And I work with people, I mean, I'm talking about people who spent a lot of money on market research and stuff, and they still can't answer that question. And if you don't sit down and take the time to think about, okay, my audience, who I've now very carefully defined, and I love them, and here's, I'm writing this for them. If you don't know what you want them to do, then the piece is going to be kind of garbled. Your call to action might not connect with whatever the story is that you're telling. So it's a really important thing to know what the end game is. And that ties into your strategic marketing objectives. I come in as the writer on projects and ask to know what the marketing plan is. And people will be like, why do you need to know that? Like, because content is like an integral part of your marketing plan. So keep that in mind. And then with the audience, any piece of content you write should be written for one singular person. There is no such thing as good copy that talks to this person. Oh, and let's throw in this audience. Oh, and this audience over here, because I don't want to have to do 3 different pieces of content. I only want to do one. Again, you end up with something really watered down. The most successful pieces I've ever worked on with people, whether it was thought leadership or an ad or whatever, we had one audience in mind and one singular purpose, and then we could build whatever we were doing around that. So
Yeah.
Opinion.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's really having a clear image of who you're writing for in your mind, so that if they're reading it, they feel as though you are talking directly to them, not a crowd of people. That's how you really make that connection with them, and that's how you draw them in. So you hit that right. That's very important.
Yeah, it was also, I just want to say, there have been studies that have showed this, that the age we're living in right now is people feel disconnected. I think we all know that. So when they're reading your copy, whether it's a social media post, an email, or an article, they want to feel like you see them. And the way you do that is by, I'm writing to Alan, or I'm writing to Wendy. And it doesn't matter if John over there isn't Wendy, because I'm writing to one person. Other people are going to feel that kind of humanity of it and feel like they're engaged in a personal conversation. And that is really what people want and what they expect. So you do that by being very specific about who you're writing to.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah. All right. So, you don't want to be that one-hit wonder with your copy. So consistency is key to building the right reputation and credibility through content. So what are 2 things you would advise a company to set in place to ensure consistency and quality of content? And with that, we'll have Wendy start.
Well, I think the first thing is, we're kind of echoing what the last question too, piggybacking on that, have a commitment to it. If you want content to work for you, you got to work for your content. And so be committed to putting some kind of content plan into place. If that's 1 blog post a month, that's 1 blog post a month. If it's a case study a quarter, that's fine too. But just commit to doing something, and then make sure that you have the resources to follow up on that commitment. So you have the person or people or whomever who's going to produce that content, and the process laid out as to, again, who's going to produce it, where's it going to live, and how are you going to distribute it. I think distribution is probably could be a topic for another Thrivecast, but you don't want to just write content, like I said, and stick it in a drawer and post it once and be done. You worked hard for that content, so let that content work hard for you.
Yeah, and I think a content plan, content strategy is key. So I think that you've hit on two big things. Otherwise, content always becomes that last minute thing. And you don't want that to happen, because that's the foundation and drives everything.
For sure. And I'm guilty of it. I mean, last year I was going to write a blog post a week. Guess what? I didn't write a blog post a week. So, it's easy to fall off that wagon. But if you set realistic expectations that you or your company can achieve, then, that's good. If a blog post a week for me was just way too much. But, I had big plans.
Oh, overachiever, right?
Right.
All right, Susan, I'd like to hear your perspective on this one.
Well, not a surprise at this point. I agree with Wendy on the planning piece of it. If you don't have a plan, then nothing's going to happen. It needs to be scheduled. I would kind of take that a step further and saying, one way to help keep it from becoming overwhelming is to, when you get your plan, to set aside what we call batch days, which is a chunk of time where you knock out a lot of it. So rather than, oh my God, it's Tuesday morning, I need to write my Tuesday blog, you're not always in this feeling of, I need to catch up. So writing it ahead of time, going back to things that you have from years ago and repurposing it can really help you still continue to freshen that message and get it out, update things and make it less of a burden. The one caveat on that is that being tone deaf, like Wendy said, my guess is that travel agent had scheduled out their emails months ahead of time and forgot. Because when COVID came out, a lot of people forgot that they had social media posts or whatever on auto schedule and were putting out all sorts of tone deaf messages at the time. So, just keeping that in mind, but you can create things ahead of time so that it's not a huge burden. But my second point, we've already talked about this, but I really am hoping you all walk away knowing that the audience is important and what your audience needs is important, because that's going to determine what you're producing and where you're distributing it. Like Wendy said, that's a topic in and of itself. But, if I have a friend who works with tradesmen, a lot of HVAC companies and stuff like that, and they just are not on Facebook, or on Instagram. So she started doing a lot on Instagram and was having fun, but they're not there. So nothing was happening for her. So when she went back and looked at, okay, like where do my people hang out? And is social media even actually where I'm going to find them? That helped her start getting in front of them. So knowing not just who your audience is, but then understanding them enough to know where they hang out. Are they on Reddit? Are they on some platform you don't use? Do they like blogs? Do they prefer magazine articles in print? Figure it out.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, really doing a deep dive with your target audience, not on your target audience, but with your target audience. I mean, sit down with some of your key target audience or customers that you trust who are your target audience group and ask them, where do you go to get this information? I mean, spend some time with them, really, take your ideal customer and build your target audience profile around them even. Or if you've got 5 of them that are just, I'd love to have 1 million of these people, take them all and build a combined avatar around them so you understand where they're going, what their disposition is in this current business climate, what are their biggest challenges, what are their biggest fears, what do they want from you even, if you take some time and spend some time to really get to know your target audience.
Yeah, the answers might surprise you. I just, years ago, we did that from the branding company, and the answer all of our ideal clients that we already working with told us is that what they loved about us was not the beautiful design and the good copy. It was, we always hit our deadlines and we always came in on budget. So like, I had no idea that's what was going to come out of those conversations. So you never know. So ask.
Yeah, just really know what's important to them. Rosie, I'd like to hear your perspective on this.
Sure. So with companies that I work with, or writers, I do have 2 points. So one would be, I always ask if they have some type of company style or a word guide. Many companies have a design guide and they list their company colors, the correct use of their logo, placement of photos, things like that. But not all companies have a similar guide for word usage. And that helps a lot with consistency. And if they don't have one, I build that into part of my services then too, as I'm doing substantive editing or copy editing. I create this list of things to make the writing consistent, the correct use of their product names, even writing the dates the same, using commas the same, things like that. There are a lot of formal guides out there. For example, the Associated Press that people use for their everyday writing and newspaper writing. There's a Chicago Manual style, which is mostly for books. And then different industries have their own style guide. Microsoft has a manual style for technical publications even. So that would be the first thing I suggest is some kind of style guide. And the second I have is just the more you read yourself, the better a writer you'll become. And not just books, but, magazine articles, blogs. I would suggest staying aware of when you're reading, especially maybe a blog, if you're writing a lot of blogs. I mean, what attracted you to that blog? Was it the title, the length? Was it well written? How do companies who are similar to yours, find your competitor and see what they're doing, how they're writing their blogs and communicating with their audience. All of us know our industry and we know what our company does. And I just think it's helpful to do research on what others are doing to attract the right people.
Yeah, I think you hit on some really important things there that I just wanted to kind of recapture here real quick. It's really knowing the keywords and key phrases that are aligned with a specific target audience group. And so that when you're proofreading and editing, you can double check to make sure that, okay, we're being consistent when we're talking to this target audience group and leveraging these key phrases. And we're not bringing those key phrases over here, which aren't aligned with this target audience, because it's a completely different message and it may confuse them. So by having those standards in place and knowing what messages go with what group, you can retain that consistency over a broad range of content without causing confusion. Because I believe we've even run across some situations where pricing varied based on the different target audience groups, and you caught that the pricing for one group was put in the other group, and so that would have caused a ton of problem. But through proofreading, you with those guides, you were able to retain the integrity of the pricing structure that they had across the different channels.
Exactly.
And I really think that's really important, and just lining that. So that's pretty key, making sure that you can be consistent. What we're going to do now is we've got a lot of really good questions coming in from our listeners today. So I wanted to kind of tap into our listeners. And we have one here from John that says, why is there so much jargon and business speak in the writing we see every day? And I think that's a really good question. And I think that qualifies as an ABQ, another burning question. So I'd like to put that out there for Wendy and see if you have any inputs around that.
That's funny that you mentioned that, because I was just writing something about not suggesting that businesses don't use jargon in their content, because just because they use it doesn't mean their target audience uses it. It makes the target audience not only feel, uninformed or potentially stupid, but they just don't understand what they're talking about. So you know what happens when you assume, right? So don't assume that just because you use certain key phrases or jargon that your target audience does. And even if you know that maybe they do, I would caution on the side of not using it often, unless it's a very technical, you're very technical writing to, say, a med tech audience or healthcare providers, that they understand that language. But really use language that your general audience would understand, and don't toss in your speak because you think it makes you sound smart, because it doesn't.
Yeah, kind of like what Rosie said earlier, you know your topic really well, so you're way up here, but your customer may be way down here, and that jargon and everything's gonna not necessarily add clarity or make you look good. It's gonna actually cause confusion and maybe make them feel intimidated and want to go somewhere else.
Right.
So really get to know your target audience and where they are in that.
Yep.
Yeah. So Susan, I'd like to kind of hear your perspective around that. The question again is, why is there so much jargon and business speak in the writing we see every day?
Yeah, and I think, in addition to everything Wendy said, I mean, my blunt opinion is that it's lazy writing. It's not understanding your audience. You see that when people are disconnected from that spectrum and the fact that the audience doesn't have the level of knowledge that they have. And it's easier to write in the language that you know every day, rather than finding, okay, how do I actually explain this to somebody who doesn't understand what I'm talking about? Yeah, so that's really my succinct opinion. I think it's laziness.
Yeah, that's okay to say that. All right, so we have another one here. Sometimes with social media and emails, you see a ton of posts, or people receive 2 or more emails in a week from someone kind of marketing something. Is this complete saturation with content an effective strategy? If so, why? Because it seems like it's very disruptive. With that, I'd like to kind of hear what Susan has to say.
Yeah, that is such a good question, and it's something that people ask me all the time. And saturation is kind of in the eye of the beholder. It depends on who you are and your business, whether 2 emails a week is too much or frankly not enough. What I tell my clients when they're grappling, well, so first of all, what saturation in email would be is probably different than what it would be in social media, because just the cycles and of that are different. You're going to naturally be able to put out more on social media because of just, it doesn't stay in people's feeds very long. But in terms of, the email, if you are writing something that is very connected to your audience and they are, they're interested in what you have to say, then you're not saturating them with 2 emails a week. But if you're just sending out something that they don't care about and you're being blind to the fact that they don't care about it, then yeah, 1 email a month would be oversaturation if you're sending them something that they don't want to get. So that's why it's, building your list and being really careful about who you bring onto it matters, and whether people are going to feel saturated or not.
Yeah, I like that. It gets down to the value you're delivering.
Yeah, I know people that send emails every single day. I was on a list for a while, and I got an email from this guy every day, and it was so good every single day that for almost a year I read it every single day. But not many people get that.
Rosie, I'd like to hear your perspective around this one.
I agree with Susan. If you're sending your message to the right audience and the copy is well written, no typos, your audience will welcome hearing from you on a frequent basis like that. I'm on a few bookstores, their email list. I opted in. I like reading them, but around the holidays, they started sending several emails in a week, and I did consider unsubscribing. Even it was just, I was like, yes, okay. With my own side of the business, for the past year, I've emailed out a copy tip of the week to my clients. Last fall, I was thinking, I wonder if that's too much, if I should go to monthly. And so I actually sent out a survey to my clients, asking them first if the content was, relevant to them, if they still wanted to receive the copy tip of the week email, and just ask their thoughts about monthly or weekly. And sorry, my mic's acting up. And most of them said they wanted to continue once a week. So again, I asked my clients, my audience, what they wanted, and went through that way.
All right, cool. That's great. Wendy, I'd like to hear kind of what you have to say around that.
Yeah, and I'll just echo Rosie and Susan. I think it really depends on the business, what you are trying to accomplish, and who your audience is. I'm a fan of weekly emails if it makes sense, because even if your open rate isn't super high, you're still getting eyeballs to your name. And so if and when the time comes where your services are needed, you might be top of mind. You hopefully are. And another way to determine if it is too frequent is look at your unsubscribe rate. If your unsubscribe rate is going gangbusters, well, then maybe you need to reevaluate and figure out another strategy. And I love Rosie's suggestion of asking your audience. I mean, your audience, if you have an email list, they're somewhat loyal to you. They want to hear from you, and they would love to give you their input. And so I think, adding value to your audience by suggesting to them that you care about their opinion is a great way to not only show that you care, but really understand what they want and what they need. Social media, you know, like as Susan mentioned, things come and go in your feed often. And I do think that depending on the channel, there might be too much, but again, it really depends on the channel. You could post to Twitter all day long and a lot of your followers might not see what you have to say. So, you know, it really depends on the channel, who your audience is, and the purpose of that piece of content or copy.
All right, we'll ask one more question here, and we'll kind of keep our answers a little on the shorter side. But do all writers need to write for SEO? You know, SEO optimization, so search engine optimization. So I guess with that, I'll ask Wendy.
I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I think if you're writing web content, definitely you need to understand keywords and how people are searching for you.
Yeah.
And again, if you're writing with their mindset in mind, you're gonna understand how they're gonna be searching for you, and you're gonna be including that in the way you're writing to them.
Right. I think focus on quality more than SEO will serve any writer well, right? So you can keep SEO in the back of your mind, but just the focus should be quality and your message, and more importantly, who it's for and what you want it to do for them.
Sure. Susan, I'd like to hear if you have a similar answer or if you have a slightly different one.
No, the answer is the same. If you have to choose quality over SEO, and SEO only really matters if you're writing something that's going to be searchable. So, you know, on your website, your blog, maybe Pinterest, maybe YouTube, but a lot of social media, you know, you've got your hashtags, but it's not an SEO thing. So don't worry about it right now. I mean, with all the other things to worry about creating content, let the SEO go if that's going to completely stress you out.
Yeah, it's kind of like eating. Don't eat too much of one thing. So we kind of do a nice blend. With that, we're kind of coming to the end of our hour here, and I wanted to thank our panelists for sharing their insights and wisdom today, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending. And this is, you know, something I'm going to share something here that we have not really shared with our past episodes, but I think it's important to note to show our appreciation for the panelists and the time that they give here and the information. We have on each episode of Thrivecast, we make a donation to a cause on behalf of our panelists. And this month's episode, we're supporting and featuring Claire Housing, which is a local organization based here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And they provide affordable and supportive housing options and create healing communities that optimize the health of people living with HIV and AIDS. And if you want to learn a little bit more about them and maybe contribute, it's clarehousing.org. And that's CLARE housing, HOUSING.org. Great organization. And we've enjoyed learning and helping to support them. And so I hope you've enjoyed the conversation today. And if you have any follow-up questions, please send them to info@consciousbranding.com and we will respond to you. There were a few questions that we didn't get answered today, and we will follow up with you to make sure you get your questions answered. And I'll be sending all of you a follow-up link to the recording of this episode along with some of the bonus materials. And so feel free to share this with other business owners you think would be interested in it. And our next Thrivecast episode will be in February, and it is called What Are You Waiting For? It's time for imperfect action. So I look forward to seeing you in February. And remember, you create your world. So believe in your vision, drive it with purpose, and above all, take action. So until next time, go out there and be remarkable.